So Yuanzhi is an assistant professor in the machine learning department at CMU. His research is in machine learning in general, with recent focus on non-convex optimization, deep learning, and also online learning. He has made significant contributions to these directions, like theoretical guarantees of deep learning, some breakthrough results in online convex body tracing, and so on. There are many more that I cannot mention all of them. One of his work has got the best paper award in code. So I have very nice personal connections with Yuanzhi. I have been very happy to be within several projects collaborating with Yuanzhi. I've been always amazed by his technical strength and deep insight. And today he's going to talk about one of his great recent work on deep learning. So I'll let Yuanzhi pay the talk. Okay?
Hey, thank you for the great introduction, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you very much for coming. I am experiencing a very warm welcome, and the number of attendance in this talk is much higher than my lecture in CMU, who has like 120 students enrolled, but usually only 30 of them show up. So anyway, thank you very much for coming. And today I'm going to talk about backward feature correction. How can deep learning perform deep learning? And this talk is based on the joint work with Allen-Zhu. He's a researcher at Microsoft Research. Okay. As usual, we want to start the talk by talking a little bit history of machine learning. And we start about the practical side of machine learning in history. And so there's some question. Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, I was just reminding everyone that if they have a question, they can either post it in the chat or they can unmute themselves and ask a question. And questions are usually welcome. So good.
Yeah, please feel free to ask. See, there's only 39 slides and they are very not very dense. So I expect this will be very quick if nobody's asking questions. Okay, cool. As I said, we want to begin with the history of machine learning, and we always want to look back to history to see what we have achieved. And we look at the practical side of machine learning in phase 1, or the earlier phase of machine learning. People are in practice are usually using the single layer learning models, and these are like single layer perceptrons, in particular linear regressions, kernel method, or linear regression over feature mappings in general. And then after that, practical machine learning enter phase 2. And these are like convex machine learning programming with regularizations. In particular, there are feature mappings with some convex regularizations to improve the generalization of the solution. For example, people like to add L1 regularizers for lasso or nuclear regularizers for matrix completion, matrix sensing, or Sc.D regularizations for the sum of square hierarchy. Okay, so these are convex regularization tools in the practical machine learning phase 2. And after that, machine learning really enters the phase 3, which is multi-layer learning model or deep learning in general. And these models are multi-layer perceptual. Their learning process are no longer based on the decision of a single layer. There are multiple layers in the decision phase of using deep models. And these models are also highly non-convex due to the structure of in the multiple layers. Okay, so in this phase, the power of machine learning really being boosted off chart. And this is where we kind of see all the most of the cool applications nowadays coming from. And then we also look at the theoretical side of machine learning, as the theoretical side will be the focus of the talk. For the theoretical side of machine learning in the phase 1, we do see a very tight connection between theory and practice. We understand most of the fundamental questions in this method, both statistically, such as sample complexity, or computationally, such as running time. I mean, we understand how to make these models sample efficient and computation efficient as well in these single layer models. And for convex regularization phase, we see an even tighter connection between theory and practice. Many of the algorithms used in convex regularization, they were first posed by theoreticians. One famous one is the matrix sensing. The L1 regularization was kind of essentially introduced by a bunch of theoreticians, and then is widely used in practice to solve the problem. And we understand very much like the fundamental questions in this phase as well, both computationally and statistically. Okay. And now what happened to the theoretical side of machine learning when we enter phase 3? Okay. At phase 3, we sadly see a very huge drop from the power of the theory. Okay, in order to embrace the multi-layer structure of these practical machine learning models. Okay, what are these theories? We start to understand the theory of deep learning by studying very, very simple model. For example, theory for multi-layer linear networks. Their power are very, very weak. Okay, this is the line of kernel method or linear regression over feature mapping in general. And linear functions, the power of a linear learner is clearly below the line. But deep linear networks are one of the essential steps towards understanding deep nonlinear networks. And people started to develop theory of deep linear networks. And then they have developed theory of neural networks with one neurons. For example, learning a single value or sigmoid. And clearly, if you do classification, this single value or sigmoid, or even regression, the single value or sigmoids, they are still below the power of kernel method. Usually, they are also, such as the single sigmoid is learnable by kernel method as well. And then people study neural networks with one-dimension inputs. These are all very weak models. Their powers are very low, but the theories are very hard for them. And after that, people start to study the theory for training last layer networks, such as conjugate kernel approach. And these are definitely still kernel methods since only last layer is trained. I wasn't talking about tree-based discrete decision machine learning. They are kind of a separate topic. Right now, I'm only talking about the continuous optimization-based machine learning instead of rule-based machine learning. Okay, but that's a very good question. You can do boosting over decision trees. Is not covered in this picture yet. I'm only covering the one trend of the machine learning. This is not really the entire picture. Okay, thanks for asking. Then people start to study the theory for learning neural networks with kernel methods. And obviously, it is still below the line of kernel method, but there are some simple multi-layer neural networks that can be learned using kernel methods. And then after all of this, there comes the grand theory of neural tangent kernel, which says that neural network can learn most of the functions that are learnable by kernels. Okay, so if you have a function that is learnable by kernel, very likely it will be able to learn by neural network. But still, it is a function that are learnable by kernel methods, okay, learnable by a single layer model. So basically, from this chart, we can see that the state-of-the-art theoretical understandings about deep learning is very limited. They are far behind the pace of practice. And in particular, from A to D, these are theory for shallow learners. Okay, these are not theory for deep learners. These are theory for learning the neural net by just training a linear layer, not the hidden layer, not seeing the deep connections between each layers. Okay, so people have been given many fancy names to some of the works in this space. For example, the neural tangent kernel, but no matter how many neurals are there in the name of these learners, they are still shallow learners. Okay, no matter how many layers you have to define the neural tangent kernel, it is still a shallow learner, not a deep learner. Okay, it is still a kernel method, which is shallow. The decision is only based on training the last hidden layer, last linear layer instead of those hidden layers. Okay. So I am going to cover E in this talk, which is something that is not shallow anymore, something that is a theory for real deep learner, and we can even prove lower bounds that no kernel methods can do that. Okay, so it's probably stand above this kernel method line. Okay. And hopefully one day we can push the theoretical barrier towards the real deep learning regime, which is the blue thing there, okay? But this work made some preliminary progress, at least we stand above the shallow learner baseline, okay? And so before we start talking about our work, we always start asking this very philosophical question: what is deep learning, okay? And so basically, we always find the answer by just Google searching through the Google, okay? And I guess when I search the Google, it might be the Wellington state, so there's a laugh in this Google. But anyway, so we search Google, we ask Google what is deep learning, and we click the first result. And then there's a bunch of giants in the machine learning community that provides the answer in this very well-established oracle. And first of all, they describe deep learning as a method of hierarchical feature learning. Okay, it is a way of doing hierarchical learning. And in particular, the hierarchical learning means that the computer learns complicated concepts by building them from simpler ones, okay? So deep learning can learn some very complicated concept class by decomposing it into a composition of simple, easy to learn concept classes, okay? So this is where the power of deep learning comes from. And all the shallow learners, they only have one shot learning. They are not decomposing the concept class into simple concept classes. Okay, so they are shallow learners. And deep learning, the unique power of deep learning comes from the power of the so-called hierarchical learning. Okay.
Yuanzhi, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, so, with the basic architectural component here is sort of a ridge-like function, if you will. Like if I take a single neuron and it's activated by a linear combination,
yeah,
that gives you a certain class of functions. And certainly then compositions are very helpful to move outside of that class. But I wonder, when you go back to kernel methods and things that use different building blocks, not ridge functions, but radial basis functions and so forth, that gets over some of the limitations associated with just a two-layer neural network in the conventional form. Would you comment on that?
I'm not sure I understand completely the question, but for kernel method, no matter how do you define the kernel, the training method, training is still one shot, which means that you have a prescribed feature mapping. They may contain some of the hierarchical features, but still they are prescribed. They are there before you learn the function. So the feature mappings or the feature mapping parts of the kernel methods are not learned. Okay, no matter how.
Maybe I could just interrupt. I guess maybe another way to phrase my question is, if I just have a single hidden layer network with nonlinearities.
Yes.
The functions would be, for example, ReLU functions, and they would be they're non-localized functions, right? They extend infinitely in certain directions, right?
Yes.
And that non-locality of the building blocks in a shallow network seems to be one of the real limitations. Limitation by not using non-local building blocks in a shallow network. And I went, yeah, that's true.
Sorry, there was some connection issue. Can you repeat the last part of it?
Yeah, basically the question or comment is a shallow network, which just say one single hidden layer. The function that you're representing is represented as a superposition of non-local functions.
Yes.
Ridge-like functions. And once you move beyond just a single hidden layer to two or more, you can get this compositional feature that allows you to easily construct localized functions from non-localized functions with composition. And so I'm just wondering how important this issue of localization versus non-localization in the building blocks of your function class are, how relevant is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, first of all, even ReLU neural network with one hidden layer is a universal approximator. So it can approximate any Lipschitz function as long as the number of neurons is large enough. And then there are theoretical work saying three-layer ReLU network is more powerful than two-layer network if you constrain the size of the network. But then there's no more theory that can go beyond three-layer. So people do not know whether four-layer network is more powerful than three-layer neural network with ReLU activation when you restrict both class to be a certain bounded size. Okay, this is a very deep complexity question and can relate it to polynomial threshold circuit that has been an open problem for like a couple of decades. So the short question is, we know three-layer is more powerful than two-layer, but we don't know four-layer is more powerful than three-layer.
So can I ask a question about this? So this is Elias Diakonikolas. So if I understand correctly, like in complexity theory, people were looking at threshold gates or linear threshold functions.
Yes.
And these questions about like TC0 and all these things, like they are in that world. Is it? And I know there has been some work of transferring some of these results to continuous functions. Is it actually clear that it would be at least as hard to prove that the polynomial size, depth 4 ReLU network can do more than a polynomial size depth 3 ReLU network?
Kind of depending on the approximation ratio. If you want exact computation results, it may be easier to prove. But if you want an approximation hardness, then you can discretize your input to Boolean, and then you can simulate a ReLU by threshold gates or simulate a threshold gate by ReLU. So I guess they are equivalently hard in certain signs.
But then you're talking about like arbitrary distributions on the input as opposed to well-behaved distributions?
Yes, so if you want arbitrary distribution over input, that may be kind of easier. So if you want to prove a distribution hardness for like Gaussian distribution, that may be as hard as the polynomial hierarchy in the circuit complexity. That's only my conjecture. There's no clear connection.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay, if it has been proved, no, I understand.
So there's no such thing of a clear connection between polynomial hierarchy and this, but there have been certain conjectures, but there is no actual proof for that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So basically, deep learning is this hierarchical learner, which means that during the first training process of a deep neural network, for example, you learn some image classification task, the first layer of the neural network, that the first layer, meaning the layer closest to the input, it will learn certain features representing the most basic knowledge of the data set. For example, you have some images, and then you learn some basic features such as the age and colors of the feature. Okay, these are very simple function of the image. You just detect whether there is an age or not. And then the second layer learns features representing the simple ways to composing the features from the first layer to reason about the data. For example, you can compose two ages to detect whether there is a corner. You can compose two colors to detect whether there's a mixed color. You can compose a color and an age to detect whether there is an age with that color. Okay. And then the third layer learns features that compose the features from the layer in the most simple way. Okay, you compose corners maybe to detect a closed shape, such as a square, something like that. Okay, so you detect these very simple. The point is, the complexity of the features as a function of input, they gradually increase for deeper layers. But if you look at the complexity of the features comparing to features directly below us, there is a then the complexity is always remain very simple. Okay, although in the deep layers the complexity of the feature is very high, but if you look at the complexity of this feature in terms of the feature below it, immediately below this layer, then the complexity remains rather unchanged. Okay, they are still simple class of functions building on top of the feature below the current feature. Okay, so these are my ugly hand drawing, but there are some real image. For example, you use ResNet to train on CFAR10 dataset, right? Okay, and you can very clearly see that in the first layer, the ResNet is detecting age signals like this. Okay, so there are 4 age signals, and then there are color signals like blue, green, blue, and red. Okay, and then there's some like dot signals. I'm not sure what are they corresponding to, but then there's still all these type of dot signals. So they are very, very basic function of the input. They're just detecting whether the input has this pattern there. Oh, okay. And after that, the layer 2 will learn to compose the feature from the first layer. For example, you compose 2 edges to get a corner. Here you compose 2 edges, to get a corner, and you compose 2 blue to get compose 2 green to get a bigger green. And this is like a mixture of green and blue. This is a larger blue, this is a larger red, and this is a mixture of colors. So anyway, you learn it using a simple combination of the features from the previous layer. And after that, do it for a while, and eventually you will end up with something amazing. Okay, some features that learns, for example, here you learn the shape of a car, here you learn a horse. Okay, here you learn a kind of an animal, and also this is a car, this is like a boat. Anyway, so you learn this by composing these simple features. Okay. So now, how do we actually reason about this deep learning process? Okay. So how do we reason about how deep learning can perform this type of hierarchical decomposition of the features? And the starting point is that there are a vast amount of theoretical works focusing on how to learn two-layer neural networks. Okay, so there are all these works for learning two-layer networks. Okay, so there are a lot of citations in our paper. You can check about it. I'm not going to elaborate it here, but we basically kind of have somewhat an understanding of how do we learn a two-layer network. Okay, with value activation or other activation functions, and especially with quadratic activation function, we kind of have a complete picture. How do we learn a two-layer network? So we sort of understanding how to train one single layer of neural network. And now the idea is, how about we just train the neural network one layer at a time? Okay, if that would work, then we kind of reduce the learning problem to solving some known learning problem like arithmetic. Okay, some theoretically known learning problem like one step. So we kind of have some reasoning how deep learning works. Okay, and now the baseline is that layer-wise learning, it will actually work, but not just not as good as training all the layers together. Okay. So for example, on CFAR10 data set with back normalization and data augmentation, 8-layer neural network, if you train 100 epoch of a layer, okay, So you train layer-wise. You first train 100 epoch of the first layer, and then you add the second layer and train 100 epoch of the second layer. Then you add third layer, train 100 epoch of the third layer. And you can see this training accuracy is a solid line, and the generalization accuracy is the dot line. Okay, you can see that the learning is quickly plateau at layer 3. Okay, at layer 3, you almost reach the optimal accuracy you can achieve, and by adding more layers, it does not improve generalization. Okay, and also these are state-of-the-art results. Kind of you also change the size. Okay, they are wide net with 800 channels per layer, so it's very, very large. And still, you can see that they are all plateau at layer 3. Okay. And also, if you try it on VGG, this experiment is done by somebody who's a master student at MIT. I copied the picture from his thesis. For example, you train some architecture like VGG, you can still see its plateau at very early layer. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of at layer 4 or layer 5, you kind of already plateau in the accuracy, and adding more layers, it doesn't really increase the accuracy anymore. Okay, also the accuracy is very worse. It's much worse than a standard VGG on CFAR, which is above 90. Okay, this one is below 85. So for layer-wise training in ResNet, it will not only achieve an 80% right-ish accuracy, and going very deep does not help. But you can see for a real ResNet, even go to layer 40 or layer 60 or even layer 80, the accuracy is still gradually increasing. Okay. So for real ResNet, if you train all the layers together, going deep is really working. But if you train layer-wise, going deep is not going to work. Okay. So the main observation is that if you do layer-wise training, going deep does not help that much, since the lower layers are too greedy and overfitting to the higher level signals. Think about the case when you train the first layer, it is actually trying to use the neural net. It doesn't have all the higher layers in the architecture, so it's using the first layer to feed the entire function. And obviously, it will learn some overfeed to some higher signals that should be learned by higher layers, because it does not know there are higher layers that can help him to do the job. So during the training, it will overfeed a little bit of the signal from the higher layers. And the point is, this overfitting, they cannot be correct, okay, because you do not train layer 1 anymore during the later phase of the training. So if it's overfitting at the first step, it's overfitting for all the later steps. So the quality of the features, they will be not very high for the deep layers due to the overfitting in the lower level features. Okay, so all these lower level features, they are overfitting to some higher level signals. So the layer-wise training cannot go very deep, because the quality of the features cannot be improved once you finish training one layer. Okay, and when you train one layer, it is overfitting because it does not know there are the higher level layers that can help him to learn the features. It will use the maximum power of this layer to learn all the signals, including those that should not be learned in this layer. Okay, and the main question that we are going to study in our work is, how does deep learning, in particular training all the layers together, fix that? Okay. And basically, we are comparing, right now we are comparing layer-wise training, which essentially reduce the deep learning to a shallow learner, where in each step, you train the first layer, then train the second layer, then train the third, fixing all the lower layers. Okay, it typically cannot match the performance of training all the layers simultaneously. Okay, as we mentioned, the lower level features are not very good if we train the lower level layers. For example, the quality of F1 is not very good if we only train the first layer due to overfitting to the higher signals. Okay. And the main question that we are interested in this work is that when we train all the layers together, how does the quality of F1 being improved? Okay, when we train all the layers together, how does the quality of the lower level features getting improved so we can go deeper and improve the accuracy further? Okay. By how I mean theoretical statement or some theoretical reasoning. Okay, and this is where we develop the principle called backward feature correction. And in this principle, we showed how training the higher level features, it actually improves the quality of lower level features. Okay, so this is a backward learning step where you train the higher level of the neural network. It somehow actually improves the quality of the lower levels, the level below this one. Okay, so we call this process backward feature correction, and we call the layer-wise training process the forward feature learning. Okay, so basically, this is some experiments we've done in our pictures. For example, if you train AlexNet, okay, on CFAR10 dataset, the main observation is that if you only train the first layer, okay, so all the other layers, it does not exist, you only train the first layer. And the first layer, it will learn something, it will learn some meaningful age and color signal, but the quality is not very good. Okay, there are all these colors in the age and there are some mixture of the colors. Although it is already discovering some meaningful signal, but the quality is just not very good. The quality is, there are some meaningful signal, that's why layer-wise training can work, but it just cannot work very well because the signals are not of the highest quality. Okay, and then if you start to train all the higher level layers and the first layer, okay, so you train all the layers together, the quality of the features in the first layer is also improved, okay, using the so-called backward feature correction process that I'm going to talk about in this talk. Okay, so what is our approach to understand the backward feature correction process, which is how do you train, how the lower level quality of the lower level features be improved by training the higher level features? We actually present a formal proof of this deep learning process with backward feature correction under the model of multi-layer density with quadratic activation functions. Okay, so we assume that there is a multi-layer or a hierarchical target network that generates the label by composing the feature layer by layer using a quadratic activation function. Okay, so the complexity of the network per layer is very, actually it's not a matter of escaping local minimum. In the first layer, you are already at global minimum of the first layer. Okay, this is because the first layer is trying to overfeed to some higher level signal. I will give example of a mathematical example, then you will see why the quality of the first layer is not very good, even if it is already at the global minimum of training just the first layer. Okay, that's a very good question. As I should say, all these trainings for the first layer, they are already at the global optimal when you train the first layer. Okay, so it's not at the local optimal. You already over-parameterize a lot. So it's kind of the global optimal of training the first layer. The point is this global optimal is not very good. Okay, these features are the global optimal when you train the first layer, but the global optimals are not very good due to overfitting to some higher level features. Okay. And basically, in our work, we assume that there is a multi-layer or a target network that generates a label by composing the features layer by layer. Okay, the quality, the complexity of one layer is not very high. We assume the target network is using quadratic activation. So each layer you just boost the degree by by twice. Okay, so the complexity is very low per layer. And we show how training a neural network from using Sc.D from random initialization can recover this hierarchical composition of the target network gradually. In particular, we will show how learning higher level features can also improve the quality of the lower level ones. Or we also show why the lower level features are not very good. Okay, if you just do layer-wise training. So basically, this is our definition of the target network. We assume that the target network is just kind of a densely connected neural network. There are these linear connections, there are linear mappings, and then there's the sigma activation function. Okay, you also have identity mappings. This is a standard dense net. Although our theory essentially apply to any such connection, you can have some edge missing. Okay, it doesn't really matter. So basically, you can have all these edges missing. You can create you can have a subset of these connections. Our theory still apply. Okay, so this is a dense net, and we assume that the layers or in the target network, the number of channels per layer is decreasing, starting from the bottom one to higher level ones. Okay, so basically in the layer 1, you will have K1 many channels. Okay, so it's smaller or equal to the input dimension. In layer 2, you will have K2 channels that are smaller or equal to K1. And in layer 3, you will have K3 many channels that is smaller or equal to K2. So kind of you are filtering out some non-useful information, make the useful information or the number of channels smaller and smaller as the network going deeper and deeper. And note that this is a target network. Okay, so this is some network that is there, but we just don't know. And we really want to learn this target network. Okay, mathematically speaking, we just have the feature mapping of the first layer is a linear function of the input plus a quadratic activation. And the second layer, the linear function, the feature mapping is a quadratic activation of a linear function of input plus a linear function of the feature mapping of the first layer. Okay, so you are composing the features layer by layer. And then you have the final feature mapping, and then your final output of one-dimensional output is a weighted summation of the features per layer. Okay.
So what is the objective?
I haven't defined the objective. This is a target network. You can do like L2 regression or classification. Okay. So right now, maybe the best way to think about this L2 regression, we just need to learn this function G. Okay. Now minimize the difference, and we will talk about classification later. So
you don't care about parameters, right? You just care about pack learning, just recovering small error?
Yeah, you just care about recovering G with small error. You don't care about recovering these parameters. Actually, you cannot recover these parameters because the representation is not unique. For example, there's permutation symmetry, and this is a quadratic activation, so there is also the so-called orthogonal symmetry. So the expression is very non-unique. You cannot hope to recover these parameters, but you can hope to recover the parameter up to a certain invariant group, but that's also very difficult to describe. Okay, so you only care about recovering the target function G, and this is a target network. And the main observation is the target network. It is a degree 2 to the L polynomial of the input X. Okay, in each layer, you raise the degree by a factor of multiplicative factor of 2 using the quadratic activation, and you have L layers. Okay, so the output is a degree 2 to the L polynomial of the input X, which means that when L is super constant, the target function is a polynomial of super constant degree of the input X, okay, which is not easily learnable. It is a super constant degree polynomial. We are mainly interested, of course, in the case when L equal to omega 1. So the polynomial has super constant degree, and it is not a very easy function of the input. Okay.
So can I ask another question?
Yes.
Maybe I missed this. Like, what are the distributional assumptions on the?
I haven't talked about this yet. I haven't talked about input distribution assumption. I will get to that when I describe the theory.
Okay.
Okay, cool. And we also basically the target function is a degree 2 to the L polynomial over d-dimension input. And typically, if you use brute force search or even matrix sensing or using kernel method with some regularization, you would typically require either running time 2 to the d or sample complexity d to the 2 to the L minus 1. Okay. So either you do it inefficiently in terms of running time, or you do it inefficiently in terms of sample complexity. Okay, and this is typically super polynomial as long as L is equal to omega of 1. Okay, actually you can also do running time this guy, but still is super polynomial in terms of when L is equal to omega of 1. Okay, so the shallow learners typically will not be very efficient to learn a very high degree polynomial. Okay. And we also assume some condition, regularity condition. The first of all, we assume all the singular values of WLJ are constant, meaning that all the non-zero singular values of WLJ are non-constant. Okay, WLJ they may not be a square matrix, so we just assume the non-zero singular values are constant. And the more important assumption is the so-called information gap, where we assume that the target or the target function depend more on the lower level layers instead of depending on less of the higher level layers. Okay, and this is very typical. For example, in image classification tasks, okay, most of the images, they can be classified using just counting the edges or counting the colors. And less image will require you to detect whether there's a corner or not. And very, very few image will rely on the higher level features, which may say that there is a very complicated shape here, so it is a car, and there's another very complicated shape, so it's a cat. Usually a car and a cat can be detected just by detecting whether it is like a square or it's a rounded shape. Okay. So basically, the lower level features, like the basic features, they have more contribution to the labeling function, and the higher level features, they have less contribution to the labeling function. Okay, and this is kind of typical. And think about lifelong learning for humans. We also spend much more training data on the basic elementary maths and much fewer training data on the very advanced material. Okay. And basic math, they are of course applied to a much higher domain. And the advanced material like this, they are very domain specific and it has less contribution to the labeling function. Okay. And what is our learner network? Our learner network is essentially an over-parameterized dense net with cultivations. Okay, so these hidden layers are over-parameterized a little bit. Okay, but it has the same structure as the target. Okay, so here is our main theorem. Our main theorem says that when KL is equal to D to the 1 or 2 to the L, this is a special case actually of the main theorem. Our main theorem definitely extends to a wide range of parameters, but those parameters doesn't really matter that much. And we will take the simplest setting where we just assume in the target network KL is D to the 1 or 2 to the L, and alpha L is L plus 1 is alpha L divided by D to the 1 over L. Okay, and this is really, this condition is really makes the information gap tight, because if you look carefully, the size of the output or the actual variance of the output here is proportional to the size of KL. Okay, so this one is proportional to KL, so we have to scale the alpha L down a little bit to make sure that the actual output in terms of function value is smaller in the higher level layers. Okay, so then over certain input distributions, including non-spherical Gaussian or mixture of non-spherical Gaussian, and also other input distribution, even including some input distribution that are supporting only on low dimension manifold, we can tolerate that as well, but I'm not going to elaborate this. And for every L that is little of log D, and for every epsilon, given polynomially many examples, and you run Sc.D with L2 loss plus some regularization starting from random initialization, you will learn the target network with generalization epsilon efficiently. Okay, sorry, this should be G. So you will learn the target network with generalization epsilon efficiently. Okay. So basically, this is a target network. And if you take a closer look at the theorem, when L is equal to omega of 1 and KL is each layer, KL is equal to D to the 1 or 2 to the L, this implies that the hierarchical learning process or learning something using a neural net must be done by at least omega 1 times. Okay. If you do not do that, you do a shallow learning for a constant many times, then there is one round of the shallow learning process that you have to learn in one shot, omega 1 degree polynomial with D to the polynomial in D input dimension. This is not efficiently doable. Okay, think about it. You do like 2 times shallow learning. So first learn some polynomial up to a certain degree. Okay, maybe efficiently, you can learn some constant degree polynomial, you can learn some constant level layers. Okay, so maybe you can learn some layer 10 with sample complexity D to the 10, but still the remaining part, K10 is still D to the 1 or something, it's a polynomial in D, and the remaining degree is still super constant. Okay, so even if you do some kind of polynomial learning for a constant many rounds, you will still need to learn a degree omega 1 polynomial over D to the over some poly D dimension input. Okay, so that you cannot do efficiently. So you have to do this hierarchical learning. You have to do hierarchical this learning for super constant times. Okay, so you need to make the learning process very, very deep. Okay, in order to get an efficient learning result for this very high degree polynomial in the end. Okay, and actually to the best of my knowledge, this is also the only theoretical work of how to learn a deep neural network via Sc.D, so the target function are not directly learnable by known algorithms. And we are actually also prove a lower bound that kernel methods cannot do it when L is omega of 1. Okay, and so let me get to the intuition part of how does the learning process happen. Okay, I will skip this part. I will directly talk about backward feature correction and how the learning process of backward feature correction could happen. Okay, so we take a look at this very simple case where your target function is 2-layer. Okay, there is the first layer, which is a quadratic function of the input, and the second layer is a quadratic function of the a linear combination of the feature from the first layer and the input. Okay, so it's a 2-layer network in our language. Okay, so now ideally we want that the first layer it learns the function x1 squared plus x2 squared, then it feeds x1 squared and x2 squared to the second layer, and then second layer learns a quadratic function of the linear combination of these features and the input. Okay, so it is efficient. Okay, every step you only need to learn a quadratic function. You don't need to learn a degree 4 polynomial. Okay, this is a hierarchical learning process of learning this function G. Okay, but now there is a bug in this ideal learning process. That is why the first layer is actually feeds x1 square and x2 square to the second layer. Okay. Actually, if you do the learning process using a degree 2 polynomial, the best degree 2 polynomial to approximate G, it could be x1 plus alpha x3 square. Okay, you may want to feed some of these cross terms as well using the quadratic function. Okay, the best quadratic function, it may not be this. Okay, you also have some quadratic part here. Okay, so why do you actually learn a function like that? You may actually learn a function like this. Okay, the best degree 2 polynomial, it may actually be this one. For example, if the distribution is biased or whatever, and the best degree 2 polynomial, it may actually be this one instead of the true one. So it's really, when you use the degree 2 polynomial to learn G, you are overfitting to the higher degree, higher level signals. Okay, you are overfitting a little bit, so your features are not very good. Now, any quadratic function of the features of x1 plus alpha x3 square, x2 plus alpha x4 square, and x1, x2, x3, x4, they cannot fit the remaining term of G. Okay, so basically, if you use these features as the first layer, okay, and you stick to it, then the learning process kind of died. You cannot really get 100% accuracy anymore because your lower level features are not very accurate if you do layer-wise training. Okay, so it's overfitting to some of the remaining part of the function G. Okay, so this is the problem of layer-wise training. The layer-wise training is too greedy and is trying to overfit to the higher level signals, so it cannot go very deep. Okay, and now what happens if you retrain all the layers together? Okay, if you train all the layers together, the first layer will always go first and pick up some signal. Okay, and the first layer, when the first layer pick up the signal, as we mentioned, it may not be very accurate due to some overfitting. Okay, and then the second layer, it starts to feed the remaining part. Okay, feed the degree 3 and degree 4 terms, and possibly using something like this. Okay, so it takes the inputs of features from the first layer, which is not ideal. So it has some non-ideal thing here. And then you're trying to compensate that using maybe 1 minus alpha times x3 because you already have alpha here. You're trying to compensate that a little bit. Okay, but now the main observation is that this thing is actually close to the remaining part up to accuracy alpha square. Okay, because you have alpha here, and this one is close to that one up to accuracy alpha. So the second term is actually close to the remaining term up to accuracy alpha square. Okay, and then the main observation is that if we train the first layer again to learn the remaining part, the first layer will actually get correct up to alpha square accuracy, because originally the remaining part has accuracy, has alpha weight. Okay, so the first layer may overfit alpha weight to the remaining part. But if you have the second layer trained and the second layer already subtract a bunch of remaining part, now you only have alpha square of the remaining part left. And if you train the first layer again, the first layer only need to feed alpha square of the remaining part. Okay, so it's only have alpha square overfitting. So now it's correct up to alpha square accuracy. Okay, now if you train the second layer again, the second layer will be approximate the remaining part up to accuracy alpha cube, because the input from the first layer is alpha square, correct? And you also have alpha, which is the information gap. So this process, it will converge as long as your information gap alpha is smaller than 1. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a contraction mapping, but it's following this forward and backward way. Okay, so the first layer first learn, the second layer then learn, the third layer, the first layer learns again, the second layer learns again. So it's going to a looping, kind of, yeah, definitely look like a contraction mapping. So this is how deep learning gets correct. So this is a key of backward feature correction. Okay, we also have some informal statement of the backward feature correction lemma. This says that during the training process, suppose the first L layer of the neural network satisfy that the summation of the learner minus the true network is smaller or equal to epsilon, then the features are roughly close up to this alpha L plus 1 plus epsilon square divided by alpha L, okay, square. So recall the information gap is monotonely decreasing with the alpha L plus 1 is equal to 0. So basically this means that the more layer you train, okay, this is the Lth layer you train, then for all the L prime layers, okay, for all the L prime, for all the lower level layers, the more higher level layers you train, the lower level layers will also be, the quality of the feature of the lower level layers will also be improved by this factor, okay? This factor L, if you grow, is decreasing as we grow the number of layers, okay? So if you have deeper network that feeds through the target function, then the quality of the lower level features will be better, okay? This is a so-called backward feature correction lemma. And the critical part is this is the first L layer of the network being trained up and to feed the target function up to accuracy epsilon, then the feature is correct up to accuracy alpha L plus 1. And alpha L plus 1 is decreasing. So the more layer you use to feed the target function, the quality of the features are better of the lower level layers. Okay. And of course, the remark is this is only true during the training process. It's not an existential lemma. Of course, there exists some neural network that satisfy this and the quality of the lower level features do not get improved. So it's only true when we follow this contraction map, okay, carefully during the learning process. If we just arrive at the arbitrary point of this without following the contraction map, as Robert mentioned, then it will not, the theory will not be true. Okay, so it's only true during the training process. And this is the critical lemma for backward feature correction. And kind of the real lemma says that how do we define following the contraction, following the training process is actually, we have already arrived at some warm star where the quality of the features is already close up to some big factor, then it gets further correct to some small factor. Just like in the training process, your quality of the feature get correct gradually. Okay, so it's alpha correct and then become alpha square correct and then become alpha cube correct. Okay, so you have a warm star, then you get correct. Okay, so during the training process, you keep refining and correcting these lower level features by training the higher level features. So this is basically the learning, this is an overview of the learning process. So during the training process, the first layer is going to learn a quadratic approximation of the target function, and it is not very accurate due to overfitting into the higher level features. And then the second layer will learn a quadratic function on top of the first layer, okay? And it's also not very accurate, but by the existence of the second layer, the first layer then corrects this feature of using backward feature correction due to a reduction of overfitting in the presence of the second layer, okay? And then the second layer, it learns a more accurate feature as well due to a better input from the first layer. And then you will learn the third layer. And then the first layer is further corrects this feature due to a reduction of overfitting in the presence of the third layer. Okay, so the higher degree things are getting more accurate, so you are having a reduction in terms of overfitting. And then the second layer is further correct due to a reduction of overfitting and a better input from the first layer. So keep following this chart. And in our work, we do not explicitly train the layer of the network in this backward, forward order, okay? The layers are trained kind of simultaneously, and we can still prove this result. So the hierarchical learning in the neural networks is implicit. This backward, forward, they are implicit. If you train everything together, it's doing the thing implicit in this order. Okay, you don't need to follow this order.
So you're saying you're just basically you're just using standard back propagation, you kind of get this effect.
Yeah, you use standard training, you cannot get this effect.
Got it. Makes sense.
And also our theorem extends to classification problem. You can define a classification problem. And kind of here, the information gap is essentially how many examples that require using the L layer feature to classify correctly. Okay, so how many examples? The information gap is very clear in the classification setting. It is basically just the number, the fraction of examples where you need to use the L layer features to classify correctly. Okay, and kind of very natural that the very higher level features, they are very special to some very, very specific examples. So there are very few examples that may require the L level features to classify correctly. Okay. So this is binary classification. We can see that the kind of the labeling function is an indicator. So it's 0-1 binary classification. And then the information gap is essentially how many examples are required to classify, how many examples are requires using the higher level features to classify correctly. Okay, and we can also see kind of the information gap is there, the lower level, the higher level features, they have a marginal improvement effect comparing to the lower level ones. Okay. And we also have some experiments in our earlier paper that shows such an information gap is kind of necessary. Okay, we have a beta times a quadratic times plus alpha times degree 4. Okay, and this number of examples is enough to learn a quadratic function, but not enough to learn a degree 4 function. So if we make the beta to be 0, okay, beta to be 0, there's no degree 4 the quadratic function to warm up the initial learning, then kind of your learning stuck, you cannot learn anything, not the degree 4 part. And if there's no, if the quadratic function beta is equal to 0.2 is smaller than 0.3, the degree 4 part, you still can't learn anything. Okay, you can only learn the quadratic part, but it's overfitting, you cannot learn the degree 4 part anymore. Okay, because there's no information gap. And when the beta start to get close to alpha and larger than alpha, you start to being able to learn G. So information gap is kind of necessary as well for this training process or the contraction process to work. Okay, and I guess that's the end of my talk. And I guess the basic takeaway is this forward and backward learning process or the backward feature correction during the deep learning process that allows you to go very deep. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions?
Very nice talk. This is Jerry here. On your simple example with the 4 inputs.
Yes.
I was wondering if the same can be illustrated with just one pair, not 2 pairs, like x1, x3 alone. Would that still work?
I think that will also work as well. But the point is using this. I guess if you use x1, using one pair, it can still work. Yeah, that's definitely going to work. The reason that I'm using 2 pairs is because the thing that I haven't mentioned, which is the kind of why do you need over parameterization? Okay, this part I want to illustrate that with 2 pairs, so I skip that part. That's the reason I'm using 2 pairs. But if you use 1 pair, the backward feature correction also can be illustrated.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions?
Yes, somebody just sent a link of the power of multi-layer neural network that is better than the lower level one. Okay, this is a link. As I mentioned, this paper is only for 1-dimension input. Okay, it's not a general result. So for multi-dimension input, we do not know and also it's for exact computation. So for general multi-dimension input, we do not know a separation yet.
Okay.
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 Other questions?
So if others don't have questions, I actually have some questions. So first of all, in this talk, you mentioned the target network actually is a dense net.
It's a subset of the dense net. The particular link doesn't matter. You can miss some of the links. Mm-hmm. So any neural net is a subset of the dense net. So basically, it is the most general form.
Okay. Okay. Now, what about the quadratic activation function? You need it. How important is that? Can you generalize your analysis to say ReLU?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The point is for ReLU activation, we do not know how the features are learned. For quadratic function, we kind of know how this linear thing will be learned during the training process. And we know if we train 1-layer quadratic network, no matter what is the input distribution, it will converge to the global optimal. Mm. But for ReLU, we do not know that unless the input distribution is Gaussian. But for higher level layers, clearly these outputs are not Gaussian. So you cannot use the input is Gaussian. Even if your input here, you assume is Gaussian, these features, they are not Gaussian. So the input to higher level layers, they are not Gaussian. So it's unclear how do you train a ReLU network for 1 layer. But if you can solve that problem, the backward feature correction part is automatic. The harder part is we don't even know how to learn a ReLU, one hidden layer ReLU network, okay, on arbitrary input distribution. In particular, during the hidden, when you learn, for example, layer 3 using the input from layer 2, this one you cannot have any distribution or assumption. This one you don't know what's the distribution. So kind of it's unclear how do we train a ReLU network.
Great, okay. Thanks.
Other questions?
I just wonder about the idea of learning a really high degree polynomial. If I used a polynomial kernel and say kept my x's in some nice unit ball or something, then I guess I could, use some results from Rademacher complexity to say that, oh, I can learn something that generalizes well, even though it's a high degree polynomial using just a kernel.
Yes, I have mentioned here, we have a result showing no kernel method can do that.
And is that, what makes that true exactly? Like, is it like, because I mean, again, I was just there thinking like, yeah, again, if I had a kernel, if I have a bounded kernel, which I could if I restricted the range of the inputs, even if
I guess the point is this function depends on too much of the input. So kind of, as I said here, basically, this function, no matter if you only learn the function using constant Learning hierarchy, then at one hierarchy, you have to learn a super constant degree polynomial that actually depend on poly D dimension input. Okay, so this is, and also this poly D dimension input has a very high degree of freedom. They can be Gaussian or mixture of Gaussian. So they are not concentrated on a low dimension space. And for kernel method to be effectively learn a higher degree polynomial, you have to make sure that the input only concentrate on a low dimension space or concentrate along some corner. For example, result for efficiently learning sigmoid, it is implicitly assuming the input are concentrated along the direction of the hidden unit in the sigmoid function.
Okay.
Cool.
Another question in the chat there.
If you do layer-wise pre-training, then you can do this backward fine-tuning to make the layer-wise pre-training better, I guess. This is maybe one of the potential implications to practice using our result. And people do actually try that. For example, they actually train instead of training layer-wise training, they actually train a bunch of layers, like 10 layers at a time, and just keep the bottom layer. Okay, so each step you train the 10 layers and then keep the bottom one, and then train another 10 layers and keep the bottom one. And this actually works comparably well as training all the layers together. So use these 10 higher layers to help you to correct the overfitting, and then you can commit to that. Okay, you don't need 100 layers, you need like 10 each. So the backward feature correction, you only need you don't need very deep. Okay, you can do it using a few number of layers as well. Okay. Other questions?
Any other question? Okay, so if there's no further question, probably we should end the talk. What do you think, Rob?
Sure, yeah. Let's, how about everybody give Yuanzhi a round of applause for a great talk. Nice job.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we'll let you know where to get the video. Haley can get back to you about that. She's recorded it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thanks
Bye.
everyone. See you
Thanks,
all.
Rob, for organizing.
My pleasure.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.